slides are just there for the
Are they not
people
working?
streaming. Say what?
Are they not working?
I think we're just like,
I don't know why they're not working.
it's fine. Everything is fine.
Sure.
Yeah.
Everything's
So hi, we are journalists too. Welcome. When Laura pitched me about like coming up with this topic, we were kind of bonding over our kind of shared history of kind of working in newsrooms, working with editors, working with reporters, who, you know, perhaps had like a second-class citizen kind of lens towards non-reporters and editors, those non-traditional journalism roles. So thank you so much for helping, for collaborating on this idea.
No problem.
And just real quick, I'm Tim Wong. I lead UX and design. You know, there's a couple people from my team from Gannett. And yeah, we're gonna jump through, no slides yet, but everyone can just introduce yourselves. If you feel like plugging your Twitter handle, I promise they will be up there momentarily. But then, you know, what's your origin story?
Yeah, hi, I'm Laura. I currently am an assistant professor at USC Annenberg. I teach digital journalism, and I oversee digital in the student newsroom. And I just real quick, so how I got to my non-traditional role, which my roles have included doing social media at Yahoo News, social and mobile at the LA Times, and then I worked on the BuzzFeed News app. And I tell my students, some of who are in the crowd today, that I made a whole career off of doing jobs in journalism that no one else wanted to do. Which is to say, you know, I got in, you know, in the earlier days of social when, you know, I was working on the homepage and the homepage editors were kind of turning their noses down at social, and I was like, this sounds great, sure, I'll do it. And then when I went to the LA Times, I started in mobile, and it was a time when like the LA Times had sort of gotten on board with digital, but then, you know, it was kind of like, ooh, but the mobile, the app, ooh, the desktop is better. And I was like, okay, I love mobile, that's where our audience is. So I guess that's, I tell my students that I, you know, did all those things, and that's kind of how I made my career, and it's really important to keep an open mind.
It is. I'm Alana Zach. I'm a senior multi-platform editor at CNN Money, where I basically help run our news app. Like Laura, my background is in social. I was moons ago a reporter and a writer, and I thought like social, connecting with readers not through an 800 or 1,200 word story was the future in 2011, and I turned out to be right. So I got a master's in creating social media, and then I landed at the Journal doing social for them, and now I've pivoted into mobile.
Hi, I'm Kim Bowie. I am the editor at large for Now This News, which means I'm in charge of random things that I like to do, including breaking news, real time. We just launched a new project called Newsroom. Yes, we did get that Twitter handle. And I actually came up also through reporting and then through social, and I did web production back when web production was like copy paste the newspaper into the CMS and make sure the line breaks make sense and that all of the photos match. So it makes me an old. But then I did a brief stint in product management. So my career has pretty much been like, oh, this sounds interesting, and somebody might pay me to do it. Great, I'll do that for a while. And that's pretty much how I've landed every single job.
Okay. Well, with that, and I promise that'll be the only time we ever go in line, this panel. Everything else is going to be more conversational. And also, if you have a question that's kind of germane to this discussion at hand, please raise your hand. Our volunteer,
Sarah,
raising her hand in the back, will be running around the mic. So yeah, we'll kick it off with, how is your role connected to the larger call of journalism? Kim, why don't you start?
The larger call of journalism?
Yeah.
I think what I do now, which is a lot of real-time verification and kind of transparent journalism, is I believe heavily in, especially lately, particularly this year, that our role is not just to tell people the news, but to guide people through the news, and to do that in a way that's trustworthy means we need to be transparent. And so most of my roles, when I take them, it's because I believe we need to start doing something. So when I started doing social, it's because I believed that we needed to start connecting with our audiences, and people were tired of us talking from them on a pillar. And when I went to product, I believed that we needed to start looking at technology because tech was so far ahead of us, and we had like failed people who were in that. And now I think people are looking for connection again. And so that's kind of where I'm going. And I ended up in a leadership role because I like coaching people through that, and I like teaching what I learn along the way.
Yeah, to pivot off your point about connection, I see my role as really making sure that journalism is actually read by the audience and making deeper connections with those audiences. I think that the distribution model for journalism has changed so drastically, so quickly, that newsrooms were so slow to adapt, and there's a lot of habits that are still based on like, and then somebody delivers the paper to your doorstep, and they don't think about that, all those next steps, about how you really have to think through every step of getting right to the audience in the digital world. So I really see that as hugely fundamental to journalism in this day and age, and also because I've worked in product and UX as well, and that there have been like API has some research from API has shown that people do judge you and like they assess you based like on trust, partly based on your product experience. And I actually was doing interviews for a trusted news project, and I was interviewing someone. I asked him if he read his local newspaper, and he's like, you know what, I'd love to, but their website is so bad, I don't do that. And so I think that having somebody in the newsroom thinking and talking about product is core to fundamental journalism values.
Yeah, and Laura and I were talking about this earlier. I feel like a lot of what I've done professionally is getting the reader to the news. I think at a lot of legacy outlets where you're these big, massive, beautiful ships, they don't turn easily. And I think the roles that we've all been in have been trying to help turn the ships. BuzzFeed, okay, you've been there, but BuzzFeed is more like a speedboat. They zip. If you're at somewhere that's older, it's harder to zip. You're more like, we're gonna slowly turn. So I think that's what I've been doing, and it's also, working with people who aren't spending their time. I mean, we all do this, right? Like spending your time. If you're a reporter or an editor, you're thinking about the story, your sources, doing all of that. You're not thinking about as much about like, well, what is the art I'm picking? Will this art work on a different? It might look great on a desktop. What does it look like on a smaller phone? Is the graphics editor thinking of that? Are you thinking about keywords? All of those things that how people find news is what I'm trying to bring to the newsroom.
There have been a lot of varying philosophies about this in terms of whether or not people think that journalists should do all of these jobs versus, focusing on reporting and editing and having these kind of jobs kind of like segmented off to the side. In terms of that speedboat analogy that you made, whose job do you think that is?
Oh, I think it should be the entire newsrooms. Like, I really strongly disagree with reporters who are like, I'm too busy to do that. And I'm like, well, that is not a good mentality to have. I feel like the people I know who work in audience know how to report and write. They may not do it all the time. They may not be as great as maybe David Farenholt, but they know this skill set. So I feel like journalists, you're handicapping yourself if you don't also have that toolkit.
I sort of think when journalists say, like, I don't have time, like when I get a report of this, it's like, I don't have time to do that. I'm like, well, your job is not for you. Your job is for the public, right? So if you don't have time to talk to the public, I think you're in the wrong role.
Right.
I think maybe you should go do something else, because it literally is our job to take things from complex ideas and describe them to people and make them understandable. So if you don't have time to do that in whatever form the audience or where they are, then yeah. I'm really not sure what you're doing.
And how many of you in the room how many of you work in kind of these non-traditional newsroom roles? Oh, so like everyone. How many of you had, in one way or another, struggled with an editor or reporter understanding what you do? Welcome!
Yes. Hello, we're family.
Yeah, so you get what we're saying. I have had video editor producers tell me that they didn't have, it was a waste of their time to make a social cut for a video. I think one of the things we want everyone who's coming to this session to feel like is you're not alone. That it might feel like you are in your newsroom if you're one of the few digital people, but there's all of us, there's everyone you're sitting next to, or if you're sitting not next to anyone, not that person. But you know, I hope things are changing, so thanks for coming.
Do you think that there's something to like that jack of all trades, master of none, though? Like that kind of concept? I do wonder, like professionally, and this is off script. No, I mean, like, I
Tim closes his laptop.
Bitch is going down. No, I mean, like, I wonder. I mean, I think that there's a lot of things that are going on in this industry where we're trying to figure out what are the areas that we consolidate in and what are the areas that we grow deeper in. And I am genuinely curious, like, there may be some things where it's great that you have an awareness of something, but I don't necessarily expect you to be like the best at Twitter.
I think it's about acceptance, though.
Yeah.
About accepting that, yeah, I cannot go and do an investigative reporting piece. I cannot do design, but I at least I talk to those people who do. I think it's like you all have to work together to make something great, and it's about having the right openness and building those relationships so that you end up with a good product, and so that you don't hear about a great story that's coming out in 5 minutes and they're like, make it go viral. Yeah. And they're like,
Yeah, there's a viral button on my computer.
Yeah, I know.
I have
So
to,
simple.
I have a
Yeah.
potion actually.
Oh, see, you got a potion. I have a button. We should trade. But I do think on the idea of like jack of all trades, like I'm totally a jack. I can do like a little bit of everything. Like I can code this much,
Right.
and like I know this much data. But like I've long accepted that I like pushing envelopes. So I really took to heart like what Michelle Holmes said this morning when she was like, we have to learn how to stop doing things. Mm-hmm. And like there's a point where like we're gonna do a really good job of something and then somebody else can pick it up. And you don't have to, like, I don't think a reporter has to do everything, but I think they should try to do many things.
Right, and one thing to think about is getting, your skills, your digital skills recognized as an expertise in the newsroom, just like other people have, investigative reporting or whatever, different expertise. I think that there's a sense a little bit that, to our earlier question, they're doing the important work and you're doing all the ancillary stuff, and I think that explaining why your role is important and trying to get people to recognize like your expertise and your tie, and something that thinking about lately, at Annenberg, and there's obviously a lot of different personality types there and skill sets, and we all want the same things. We all have the same goals, and I think for whatever reason culturally, there's been a little bit of a sense that digital people don't want the same things as some other people in the newsroom sometimes. And I think that we really have to get back to our goals and start articulating that to each other more, because I do think we all are there for the same reason.
In an education setting, you even talked about having a couple of your students here in the room.
Woo.
Yeah, right? How is basically what we're talking about affected kind of like how you approach journalism education?
I mean, this sounds really lofty, but I'm trying to produce
whatever word ONA.
I really take my role seriously in producing the next generation of journalists who are more than maybe some who have come before. Um, I think we lost trust with audiences for a variety of reasons, but I think some of it is our own bad habits. So I'm trying to get them to be more thoughtful, and that starts with a connection to the audience, and like getting back to some of the things I was saying earlier about how important that is. And then I say, you know, because just referencing what I just said about, you know, faculty and different skill sets, and we come from different eras in journalism. And I think we as faculty should be partnering together more and putting our skill sets together. But I'm like, the students we're producing now, they won't need that as much. They'll be better than us. They'll be more well-rounded in all of these areas. It won't be as much of a patchwork as it has been over the past, you know, decade or so in journalism. So.
Well, let's pretend we're in an episode of Black Mirror. And like imagine what is your newsroom, or what are newsrooms like with that? Kim, why don't you start?
Do they function? It's just, I don't know. I think the ancillary roles we're talking about, like product and audience dev, and just like roles that just like aren't editor or reporter, like straight editor or reporter, like they're the roles that fill the gaps in these like very many wheels that we've started turning, right? It used to be like just the newspaper, and now it's like the newspaper and then Twitter, and like somebody has to manage all of that, and then somebody has to be the grease between all of those wheels, and I think that's what we are. I think we're the thing that makes the machine go, and then you kind of forget about it, like I much forget about changing the oil in my car for a while, and then I'm like, oh man, I really need that. I think that's what would happen without us. Like,
I've driven that Prius before.
it would work. Yeah, my car functions, but it doesn't function very well, and it's eventually going to break down and like smoke, or I don't know what cars do, bad things.
Like
Grown, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice analogy of like the grease that makes things go. I think I think it's important, like, we recognize the importance of the reporters and the editors and that field. You know, I think there'd be a lot less interesting story types that come out without the people in our roles. I feel like, you know, we'd all have a lot of long reads. But
18,000 word stories.
because that's what and when you talk to a lot of journalism students, what I like is when they're like, there's still space for long form, and I'm like, yeah, that's true. And they're like, no, I'm gonna write like for the New Yorker and write a bazillion cover stories. I'm like, okay. But it's cute. I mean, it's very, you know, it's like you can see the stars in their eyes. But yeah, I think it's nice. I was just listening to Meredith Artley, who's the, I think, editor-in-chief of CNN, and she was introducing Marcus Mabry, who's the mobile editor. And she was saying he is not just the mobile guy in the newsroom. He is a journalist, and he is somebody, and I thought that was so refreshing to hear. Like somebody in a senior position saying, and actually like working there, like they mean it, that he isn't just the guy you go to because you're like, well, my app isn't working, or this, you know, the picture is wrong. He is working with the reporters from the start to make sure the mobile experience for loyal CNN readers is a great one. And I kind of wish we could get to a place where every newsroom felt that way about the people in our roles, that they don't say, yeah, you're a journalist, and then say something derogatory about you, but that they totally accept what you do.
Do you have anything?
I mean, I'm in like a unique
No, I
situation
know.
in my newsroom, but I mean, I can say like, you know, I guess because
Even of newsrooms past?
well,
or-
I mean, a
or
newsroom's
even-
past. I mean, I was on the team that created the BuzzFeed News app, so without my team, like, you might not exist.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, we've probably about doubled the number of digital platforms that we publish on for the student newsroom at Annenberg, and that's really exciting, and it's really important to me. It's like, sometimes I say like, oh, we're on like 12 digital platforms, and people are like, oh my God, that makes my head hurt. And I'm like, me too. But believe me, my life would be easier if we didn't do that. But it's really important for the students to understand this is the current media landscape, and this is the ecosystem, and that's like so important to me. So we've, like I said, we've probably doubled since I started my job. So.
I mean, like, so, you know, we're looking at different types of things. We have management heavily right now.
Mhm.
It's kind of your world.
It is.
You know, production, design. I wonder, like, when we're talking about those champions of what we do, like, not just the mobile guy dude. No, I mean, like, seriously, how do you think that he transcended just being the mobile guy? Like, what kinds of things can we do to kind of, you know, turn the value that we're offering into influence?
Talk. I think it's a really important, that's something I've tried to do at every single job I've had, but make connections with somebody in a different department. Find somebody who gets what you do, because there should definitely be at least one, and work with them, whether it's a product manager or a graphic designer or you know, anyone. Just work with them, make connections. I've had some of the most successful projects that I've done have been because I had a relationship with somebody, and so when I wanted to get something digital first accomplished, I went to them. And instead of them saying, I don't have time to do this, we already had a relationship, and they were like, I'd love to help you with this. Whereas somebody else might say, we don't have time for this.
This kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about values, and so we all want the same thing. So always articulate your values and like your philosophy behind what you're doing, because as we were saying earlier, it is tied to the core of journalism, and we do ultimately want the same things. So if you are bonding with them on values or find something in common, I'm like total copy editing nerd. I sometimes say, like, if it weren't for the internet, I'd be a copy editor. And you know, when I was at the LA Times, I sort of tried to like wave that flag proudly because I felt that that was something that people could find common ground with me on. So that has, I think, worked really well for me. And now, at Annenberg, I feel like I always have a philosophy behind everything I'm saying about digital. And again, it's in the language, I think, generally that those people can understand. So to me, it's about bonding with them over those things. Like, there is a reason you got into this business in the first place. And so if you have that, in your back pocket and you're ready to talk about it, I think that can go a long way in making inroads in your newsroom.
I believe in philosophies and mission statements and values. It sounds really nerdy. But when we were at Reportedly, like one of the first tasks we ever did, which I sort of thought was crazy, but then realized was very useful, was we sat down, we wrote a values list, a list of values, like things we valued, and I cannot count how many times we went back to that when we were arguing with somebody or somebody didn't understand what we did. And like one of our values, many of them I still hold true today, but like there was like transparency, but one of them was like calling out BS. And we called out BS all the time. And when people were like, "How dare you say that thing that's slightly opinionated for journalism?" Well, that's part of what we value. And then we had a mission statement, which we never published, but we agonized over the words because it was really important to us to know what we're doing. And the same thing works personally. Every time I start a job, I kind of have a little, this is what I want to accomplish, or this is what I want my mission here to be, because I recognize that not every job most jobs aren't forever anymore. So I have to make sure that I know what I want to get out of that job while I'm there, as long as I'm there.
What other tips do you guys have, since we've all worked many jobs? I think that's actually a great segue into kind of just what are new job kind of checklists that you guys have?
I think you should not go in assuming you know everything. You might know more, but there's also a lot you don't know. So go in with an open mind and get coffee with a bunch of different people. Learn what is important to that news outlet. You were hired because you have an expertise in something, but that's not enough. So learn, what is it? Does that news outlet, do they already have a big name and they just want to show that they're innovative and that they're a presence, or are they smaller and they're launching, or are they doing something new? What's important to them, and how can your expertise help?
Yeah. And yeah, just speaking learning, respect what's already going on and trying to figure out where you can best. Don't come in with a full overhaul plan in mind before you've really, learned the ropes.
A lot of these roles, at least in my all because I get to define my role, but also terrifying because I have to define my role. And I'm not very good at like picking and choosing what I want to do. So a lot of what I tend to do at the beginning of a job is like, okay, they've made up this title for this thing, and I talk to my boss about like what they actually want me to accomplish, like if there's like KPIs or metrics or whatever that is, whatever the goal is, but then also define that role for myself, which is also like what I tend to like walk around and talk to people like, what do you think I do every day? Or what do you think this job should be? What do you need? What can I give you in this kind of role? Or what can I help you get? Especially if you're new or in a new role, it's a good time to like give people favors because you're new and you can be like, oh, I heard from like 20 people that this CMS is really annoying and we should switch it. Because they'll probably, bosses tend to listen to the new person more than the 20 people who have been shouting it from the rooftops forever. And then all those 20 people owe me a favor, which is great. And I do that. But then also like make friends with everybody, like janitors and executive assistants. And like, I think the best thing you could ever do is make friends with your boss's executive assistant, because they can get you in on a meeting or whatever that is. And like the facilities guy can get you a conference room when you're like dying for a conference room, or things like that. Little things like that like really matter.
Yeah.
And also, sorry, go on. No, you're fine. Okay. But rely on like not just internally the people you work with, but also the community of journalists outside. There's a bunch of different Facebook groups for like audience and engagement that I'm a part of, and whenever I have had a question, I rely on their expertise because, again, you're not the only one facing what you're facing. We're all facing this kind of digital journalism landscape that's sort of on bumpy waters, and somebody might have had an answer that would work great for your newsroom. So, like, that's why Laura and I know each other, because she was doing cool stuff at BuzzFeed, and I wanted to know her, and I was like, so that sounded creepy.
She's worth knowing, though.
Alana
Yes.
Zach, stalker.
The other thing on my Twitter bio. Okay. Anyway, your turn.
No, Alana's awesome. She's also worth knowing. So is Kim. So is everybody here,
So is Tim.
obviously. And we're friends. She's not creepy.
Let's move on.
I was going to say, the other thing too, this is for I think not just for your whole job is to be happy with incremental progress, not expecting everything to change all at once. That's something my students have heard me say, in that you be proud, be excited. Don't think about, oh my God, it's not exactly the way I want, or it's not exactly perfect, or, just try to be happy with what you can accomplish and celebrate the wins of incremental progress.
Laura, earlier you mentioned something about speaking a common language. How important do you feel fluency in those languages is off the bat?
When you first start a job? I went to journalism school, so I was like very schooled in a lot of traditional practice and the language of journalism, and like I nerd out over like the way you spell lead and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like I've had that vocabulary, and I guess I have used it. I guess it goes back to like the bonding and the kind of finding the common values, and like, in some ways I think it's kind of unfortunate that the burden is on us to be like, I have to show you and prove to you that I'm one of you, but I have done that most of my career, and I do think that having that vocabulary is important, an important part of that.
And then the other direction, speaking to, let's say, like developers. Kim, you built number of products in your
Yeah.
lifetime.
And I don't know how to code like worth a stitch, but the thing I would do is hang out with the developers and like ask them. Like I have no preconceived notions about how much I know, and I'm totally willing to ask like the stupid question. I'm like, but how does that content get into the app? Because all I know is RSS feeds. Is that how it goes? And it's just like I really want to hear, and I listen and I look in person's eyes and I watch them, and like honestly with like tech people, I found that like the fact that I'm listening at all to them and not like trying to talk over them or give them directions generally gets them really excited, because a lot of like editorial types do not listen. They're like, but you need to fix the blah blah blah, and I'm like, but I want to know why it's this way. Like, what's the process to what's a better way? And so like my second job in journalism, I made really good friends with the lone developer at the San Luis Obispo Tribune, and we ended up like building a website together, which was like a hyper-local site, which I don't know if exists today, but it was one of the first in California. And so it was just something like, and then we ended up also like going rogue with each other, and I made them make a little ticker on the top of the homepage. That sounds like really lame right now, but this was like 2007, and it was like a big deal. It was a breaking news ticker at the top of a page, and if breaking news happened, we could add a ticker, and that was like against like all of McClatchy rules. We weren't supposed to do that, but we would talk about it because he was interested in my job. I mean, no developer would work in a newsroom. Okay, you're not gonna pay that much as like they can make in tech, right? Like they clearly like news or are invested for some reason. So they want to hear from us as much as we want to hear from them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like one thing that's pretty much common with all the people on this panel is the fact that we have worked a bunch of different jobs. Whether like even myself, print designer, went to J school, also was a homepage producer. All these, and
What? You know how to do that?
Wow.
I know.
It's
How
amazing.
that's
No,
yeah.
but it is that we've all kind of had to like speak, wear many hats, and I think that can be a strength that we can leverage, that everyone in this room can leverage in terms of making sure that you are kind of speaking everyone's language and acting as like this universal translator. Between all the different departments, whether or not you're working with development, whether or not you're working with a newsroom. Those of us who kind of have these non-traditional roles at the intersection of all of those kind of things, it's a responsibility and it's a burden, but it's also a source of great strength, and also a source of great kind of insight into kind of like all the balls that are rolling, that are moving in your respective organizations. So yeah. With that, we have one other question, but we could skip that. I'm curious if there's any other if there's any questions from the audience. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Oh, hold on. Sarah's going to come to you. Right there.
Right there.
And our slides that aren't showing up, by the way, had a list of like.
Oh yeah, we'll do that.
Okay. Well, we
We'll
will
get them
say
to show up. They'll hopefully, I don't know, we'll see.
Go ahead.
So as you talk about mantras and kind of shifts in conversations, currently in my org, we're trying to get away from this concept of digital services and into digital strategies. And my mantra as a product manager has been, don't come to me with solutions, let's come to me with goals, and we'll try to figure something out. But how do you, especially with journalists who have a lot of ideas, how do you change that solution? How do you dig in? Do you have any tips for like shifting the kind of where they feel like they sit at the table, or how anybody should come to the table?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, actually, you go ahead.
Oh. I feel like I've had to have a few of these conversations because with products, the way that journalists go about conceiving of something has changed, right? So I've had to have conversations where, people, come up like, we're gonna do this show, or we're gonna do, and it's gonna be like this, and I'm like, okay, let's back up and let's just like put yourself in the place of the audience, and like, what am I gonna get from this as an audience member, and like, what are the goals? Like, I love your mantra because I back it up to goals rather than a show idea or whatever, and so that's, I don't know if I'm helping you because it sounds like you kind of got a good mantra going, but I've had those conversations where I've just been like, okay, pause, let's back up a couple steps and talk about like the larger concept behind this and pretend I'm the audience, like what am I getting from this? Not what are you doing, right? Not what are we as a journalism organization doing, what is the audience getting? That's how I frame that conversation.
It sounds like you're asking questions back, right? I played that trick a lot, where you would get it like a statement like, we're gonna build a blah blah, and I'd be like, oh, so what's the purpose, and what's the timeline, and what's the goal? And sometimes questions are easier to guide people to a certain way.
Well, and I think it's also a great way to like kind of turn their skill set back on them. Reporters, all of it is about, kind of asking questions, probing, digging down to the core of the problem. That's also our job, as not being service departments, as actually being partners in, these kind of spaces, making sure that they, and that can also be a great way to like kind of build that common ground and say like, hey, I'm actually trying to do my spin on reporting. I'm trying to answer all of these questions so I can have a product brief at the end of this, or I can have a, creative brief at the end of this, like all of those things kind of add to that like shift from you being told what to do to you, having, all the information that you need to tackle the right problems. So I also like that you changed the name of your department. I think that also is like speaks.
We're a new department, but yeah. But it's, we get a lot of like, we know how to internet, we've seen it. That's
Yeah.
But yeah. Before
Yes.
we hop into any more questions, I did want to, it's unfortunate that we can't show them, but we did have like 5 key takeaways that might help inform and inspire some other questions. One of those.
Maybe we could, can you plug in?
I don't think I have a plug-in. Is there anything that to directly, okay, it's fair.
No, it's just failing us. We can
Insert
talk.
yourself, what?
We can read them out.
Yeah, I'll just read them out loud. Insert yourself at the beginning. You are where you are because you're an expert at something. Loop in your colleagues and be inclusive. And then do you want to just...
Oh, all right. So treat others as equals. We're living and working in a matrix world, so I would say, don't preach at them too much about your awesome digital skills, but, just like you want to be treated as equals, treat other people that way.
Yeah. Also build like direct relationships with people, which might help when they'll know not to come to you with a solution, so know the other stakeholders, know the people who will be positive for change.
Pick your battles. Use diplomacy and strategy to weaponize all of those relationships into like deciding what's worth it for you to go to war on.
And don't just read the slide. This was your thing.
Because you can't win everything.
That's a strategy I've used for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
just can't, like, there are things that people are going to believe is my job for, like, ever. And I'm like, whatever. I'm just going to do that for now until the day comes where I get so annoyed that I'm going to make that my war. But for now, I'm going to focus on this other, you know.
You have to let some things go, but you have to keep pushing forward with your mission.
Right.
I mean, I think it's important to decide like whether or not this is like the hill you die on.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of times a great way to kind of figure this out is, you know, like how many shits do you give?
Yeah.
If like I give 2 shits and you give 15, then I'm gonna just concede it to you because it's not worth the energy.
Yeah, I think it goes back to like, you know, always relying on your philosophy. And when something may seem small, but if it violates like your philosophy or what you're trying to do there, then that might be a fight to pick. But if it's something that you don't like or doesn't look as good as you would like or whatever, you can just be like, let it go if it was maybe coming from the right place.
And then our last takeaway is explain the why. I think this is really important when, you know, especially for like the folks on my team, especially like Marianne's in the front row. Hey, sorry, you like hate me now. You know, like just the fact that we present our work to all types of people, not just other people in newsrooms, but you know, there may be times where we're presenting to business stakeholders, revenue, ad sales people, marketing, colleagues. You know, we need to make sure that we're also shaping that message and explaining kind of how the work that we've done is, you know, working to kind of like tackle the problems that they've listed to us, and make sure that they actually feel that they absolutely feel like they've been heard and included in the process.
And you might, like, I think all of this ties into what we've been saying, but you might want, you might want to say no to something immediately. Like, that is a terrible idea. I mean, I'm sure we've all had this where someone's like, this would be so cool if we did X, and you're like, I know, that's just not happening. But, you know, it's like you have to think about it and how does that make you come across? Because you want to have a good relationship. You're not hopefully going anywhere. You want to be that grease, and so thinking of the why, explaining your thinking. Like, here's, you know, maybe we don't do this, but maybe we do it this way. And odds are the other person, unless they give 15 shits, will agree with you.
I like how that's the thing I'm known for.
Well, another thing, when you're having those conversations is, again, we were talking about backing it up to questions.
Right.
And I think that is another effective strategy in those situations. Like, we're going to do this. It's going to be awesome. And be like, oh, okay, so, you know, what is the audience going to get out of this? Or if you didn't know anything about this topic, would you understand? Like, you know, just backing it up to those questions can be another effective strategy.
And it's also a good way to explain, like, why you're making, like, especially when I was doing product, like, people were like, well, why are we building an iPad app instead of a phone app? And I'm like, well, here's why. Let me tell you why, and then you can tell me why you think that should be done, and then we'll have a nice discussion, but we're still building the iPad app. But at least I'll hear you, and you'll hear me, and, you know, maybe I can take those ideas later. And I think that's part of it, like, when you just, like, when people view you as a service department, and you're just like yes or no, and they don't understand your job, and if you don't take the time to explain your thinking, then you're not doing yourself any favors.
Yeah.
Right? The more why you can give them, the more they might understand what you do.
Emma in the corner. Sorry.
Run. No, don't run. But only if you want to.
Good cardio.
Yeah, get your steps in.
So my question,
Ooh. Nope, now it's off.
well, I'm just gonna shout then.
We'll repeat it.
How did you learn to become, like, a lot of these roles you end up having to be like the bad cop or like the parent who always says no. Like, how did you learn to like balance that bad copness and like the person who always says no with like still being like a fun and cheerful human being that people want to work with?
You bribe them with food.
And exclamation
Yeah,
points.
I definitely take on this role a lot in my current job. I've said to many students, and if they don't like it, you can send them to me. And I don't know, I guess it's up to other people if I'm doing a good job at balancing that. But I do think that, I don't know, I don't want to sound all awesome right now, but I do think that my passion for what I do is evident to most people who work with me, and I think that that tends to come through, and I think that people can appreciate that for the most part, even maybe when I'm sometimes not at my best moments. And again, it gets, I know I keep saying the word philosophy, and I'm kind of sick of it already from myself, but it gets to, I know what I'm doing, I know what my mission is, I believe in it, and it's easier, I think, to navigate some of those situations when you feel really confident about the why behind what it is that you're saying.
I also think that the people who are supposed to be good at those things all the time are very few and far between. Like, they're the magical unicorns that you never see. I think that acknowledging that you've had slip-ups in either being like too friendly, too soft, or too much of a friend to your colleagues, when you need to maintain, like, you know, certain boundaries of professionalism, but then also like when you've been, you know, quite unpleasant just because you are, you know, perhaps on deadline and need to get things done. I think acknowledging that and, you know, correcting that and being open about when you need to correct that, I think that, you know, is really powerful in terms of like building empathy, and establishing kind of like a, you know, authentic kind of persona.
It's like moments of humanity, right? Like I know you're a fan of this, Tim, but like the idea of like radical candor, right?
It's so
So
fucking
like
good.
you can come to me with anything, you can expect like pure honesty. And sometimes the honesty is like, oh my God, that's like the best idea I've ever heard. Now like literally jump up and down. But then sometimes I'm like, oh, that's not gonna work, and here's why. And like I've even come back to somebody where I was having that bad day, and I just probably yelled maybe, at them, and at least I like went home, and I was like candid with myself. I was like, that was probably not a good thing to do as a boss lady. And I went back to that person like 2 days later, and I was like, I'm sorry. And that was like inappropriate of me. I shouldn't have taken it. Here's why I was angry, and I'm gonna make it up to you. I'm gonna buy you a coffee. I know that probably doesn't make up for it totally, but hopefully you won't hate me now. And she was like, oh, it's totally fine. Thank you for like acknowledging that you were kind of snippy. And I think like that those moments of humanity, or sometimes I'll be like, I didn't sleep last night because my dog is sick or my cat's in the hospital, like things like that remind people like you are not service, you are human. I think that helps.
I think also really picking your battles. I have not been known to always do that super well. And it's something at my current job where I'm trying to do. We're working on an app, and I work with, you know, product design, the reporters and editors, like everyone, the developers, and just picking, okay, what do I actually need to talk to them about, and what matters, and what, you know, if it doesn't really matter, then I can just let it go, and that makes it easier to not be like a grumpy, unhappy person all day at work. Because I'm like, they're working really hard, and, you know, I'm respecting what they do and trying to view it in that lens. That like, this might not, okay, we launched a product, it didn't immediately have Facebook share image and text, and I was kind of frustrated. And I was like, you know what? That wasn't in version 1 of this product. Should have been, but you know, I didn't push for it then, so it's okay. It will be in the next version. So I'm not then bothering the developer constantly being like, so when are meta tags coming? Are they coming now? And that's what I sound like. So I'm, you know, trying to pick the battles. And again, food.
Next question.
Oh, more questions.
It's up to you. Sorry, over here.
Hi. As you guys discussed, that how far we've come in so many ways, that so many of our colleagues are much more attuned to digital needs, and they're all thinking about the client first and new ways to do things. And to think, but 10 years ago, it was kind of rogue to put a ticker across, you know, the website. Do you guys think it's still possible to go rogue in some of these newsrooms and organizations that have really embraced digital? And if it's still possible to go rogue, do you have any tips and strategies about how to do it?
I think it's, if you found one that's willing to like let people loose on going rogue, that's great. I think that there are some, you know, workplaces that are very open to failure and even rewarding those who, rewarding people who acknowledge failure and like quit before something becomes a huge resource or time suck. I think finding those kind of opportunities is like pretty rare, but when you find it, you should cherish it. But I think that that's also the importance of like, some process is in there for a reason to kind of help vet ideas, make sure that, something has been like, an idea has been like kind of thought through. At Gannett, we have something that we call the opportunity assessment. It kind of helps funnel and contain kind of the sprawl of ideas that could potentially be coming down the line. At the same time, if something gets passed through, we try to also make sure that we're figuring out ways that people can prototype an idea, whether that's prototyping something through starting a Tumblr blog to see if there's, an appetite for a certain content type, or things that are relatively low cost from a developmental standpoint. So I think going rogue can kind of come in various forms. There's big going rogue, but then there's also rogue that can kind of come off from like cheap experiments that can kind of yield like really positive results. And then maybe you get like the backup or the runway that you need to, really, hit the gas pedal on that.
Yes, something I think that you're kind of saying is going rogue to do proof of concept of something. I think can be a really fruitful exercise to just not talk about what you want to do, but be able to show an example of it. I think it's like especially relevant in my environment with students who are just learning the ropes of all different facets of journalism. But I believe in just getting something done for proof of concept and then trying to institutionalize it later.
Yeah, I'm very rebellious. I'm like anti-Tim in this. Like, I'm like, yeah, let's get them. But I'm all about mini revolutions now because I realize like, if you're too rogue-ish, you're just not going to succeed, and people are going to be like, oh, they can't trust you. Yeah. But if you do like tiny revolutions that are worthwhile, right? Like, things where like life and death matter. It makes sense. Like I really, really wanted to do a story, and I was like, they're not going to say yes to this. But I did all of the pre-reporting, and then I was like, look. They said they would let me in. They would let me do all this stuff, and like that's like sort of like proof of concept, or like doing a small version of it. So if it was like on a social channel, I would do like 2 or 3 posts, like just real quietly that are very different, and then be like, look, these got extra better engagement. Like we should do more of these. So it's not like you can't stage like a mammoth style revolution, but you can do little things that like are a little counter, and then go to your bosses or go to whomever you need to convince and be like, look, it worked. And because people sometimes won't, sometimes people don't believe me when I have crazy ideas unless I show it to them, because my like random sketches are not as pretty as Tim's probably.
I also think that, thank you for thinking that my sketches are nice. I also think that, having a track record of small wins that have kind of like incremented you towards whatever your bigger going rogue moment is, I think can also help get you buy-in for these like sanctioned rogue moments. No, I mean, so the thing is like, in a similar way that like no promotion that you get should ever be a surprise to anyone, all of these kind of things should always be building upon each other. So whether or not it's something like a personal vendetta or like against a certain module or feature that you have, or some kind of product idea or vertical that you're trying to pitch, I think small experiments that can, that kind of like say, hey, someone's testing these things out, then you've just created a job for yourself. Congratulations. Next question. Emily, I can't say no. But then we should pass it to like non-Gannett people afterward.
Hi. So I think we've all been in roles where we either have been a stakeholder or the person managing